Hi, my name is Ellie Brocklehurst, and with me today is my beautiful friend and co-host Beck Nadalo, and together we are full-timers. As two working mums with small children and hubbies in tow, we've come to the realisation that the best way to define us, and a lot of people out there, is that we're full-time. Full-time mums, full-time wives, full-time employees, friends and daughters. And with all that full-time comes with it a lot of weight, obstacles and constraints, but also a lot of great opportunities. We've been searching for somewhere to validate our feelings about what it takes to be a woman in today's world. So rather than continue that search, we thought, let's start it. Welcome to the Full-Timers Club. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Full-Timers Club. I'm Ellie.
And I'm Beck.
And we have had a couple of conversations in our last few weeks around some of the narratives that we're hoping kind of can change as a result of the conversation we're having or as a result of the conversation everyone else is having, but just to kind of put a bit of a light on some of the narratives we'd love to change. Mm-hmm. And one of them actually is a topic or a narrative that I'm incredibly passionate about. And somebody yesterday actually asked me the exact same question, which is, can women have it all? Mm-hmm. And I am of the very strong opinion that no, we cannot have it all. And I actually look back on my life and I get quite frustrated at the message that we received as quite young women that we can have it all. And I love the sentiment. I love that there's this kind of push towards, of course you can. You can work, you can thrive, you can be a mum, you can do all these things. I look back and go, it's really cool you guys had that conversation with the women, but no one then had the conversation with the men about sharing that. Because I think we've taken on the ownership of all of the things that we can have without, I think, the foundation of what we need in order to do that, which is the support in the home. Mm. And that's not to say that doesn't exist. Like, I've talked about this before. Will is incredibly supportive. He really leans in. But I do wonder if the message we need to get out there is you can have it all provided there's kind of support in place. Mm. So I get very frustrated because I just don't know if it was maybe the right message because it felt like it only went to one party. Mm. And I can see on your face that you might have a difference of opinion. So what do you think about it?
Can women have it all?
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's that I have a different opinion. I feel like I'm still forming an opinion, to be honest. I do believe that women can have it all, but to your point, I think you need to have the right support system in place to be able to do that. Mm. If you have got a husband who shares the load, we should actually just really quickly caveat it by saying when we were both at BBDO, there was an amazing piece of work that came out from India for Ariel detergent, which was Share the Load. Yeah. And it, to this day, is still like one of my favourite pieces of work. It's still running as a brand platform.
And they've like done all these different iterations of it.
It's freaking amazing.
And for those that don't know, it's like a play on words because it's all around physically the load of the washing. So actually men just taking responsibility and doing it. And then obviously metaphorically of just sharing the mental load that women have. It is just the perfect example of a communications message for a brand that is completely on point, completely relatable, and has longevity. It's brilliant.
Oh, it's like the perfect intersection between what the brand does and what the product does and what the consumer wants. It is incredible.
It's incredible. It's the real. I love this.
Pretty
is why I love our industry.
It's like one can creative effectiveness.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the most highly awarded campaigns ever. Anyways,
anywho,
that point. If people share the load and if there is the right support systems in place, I do think women can have it all. I don't think it's just about the men though. I think it's so much about the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm so passionate about this. And, the entire reason I wanted to be an MD, I love the work. I love the industry. Like I'm such an ad nerd, an ad freak. But one of my biggest things was if you're finally in the driver's seat, you can create all the change you wanted to create. And one of those biggest changes was creating an environment that was conducive to working women and to women who are thinking about having children and who feel like at the moment their only alternative is to leave the industry. And so that was why I was so passionate, and Iris has completely given me the platform to do that, in that we have things like incredibly flexible working hours. My entire thing is, and we've talked about it before, is about impact, not inputs. Like, I really believe I've been able to implement all the things that I wanted to implement because I've had leadership and a company that's supported me in doing it, so that women feel like they can kind of have it all. They don't have to make choices between, okay, well, I'm going to have a child, so that means I have to leave the workforce, or, okay, it might mean that things have to change slightly. But again, if you've got a workplace and a husband who is providing you that foundational support, then I can't see why you can't have it all.
But don't you think that that we're in a system that kind of, if you've had that belief as a young woman, you're kind of set up to fail a little bit. Actually, no, quite a lot. Like I think about some of my friends in Australia who have had to forego work. They cannot afford the childcare that allows them to be able to work. And so we're told, you can have it all, you can do it. Well, actually we can't, because you've got systems in place that do not allow us to have it all.
And I realise I have an incredibly idealistic point of view, because you're so right. We are so lucky here in Singapore. In Australia, I will never forget one of my best mates telling me that if she went back to work, her take-home income would be $40 after childcare fees. So she was like, so why am I working? Like, there's no point working then if I'm going to earn $40 from it after everything else. And therefore, she's the one that dropped out of her career and her husband stayed in. So it does, there's so many things that have to be in place for women to be able to stay in and have it all, whatever that looks like for you. For some people, it might not be about work. It might be other things, which is also why I get really excited about, kind of what Instagram, TikTok, D2C brands and, the democratization of like owning and running a small business is allowed, because so many women now can apply their skills to their own things. And whereas, once upon a time in our mum's age, like you would never start your own business, or you would never become an influencer and actually be able to make money, or become a creator, or whatever it might be. So I think it's allowing women to have and be more and have it all.
Don't you think it's interesting though that we've got an episode talking about post-redundancy, your sense of worth.
Yeah.
And I think about how you and I draw value from achieving and contributing, and I sit there and I think, if I wasn't able to do that, I just, who am I? And that's, I know, and as I have conversations, probably more arguments with my dad about this all the time, because of the system that's broken that doesn't allow women to work, and you need childcare and all these kind of things. And so there is a big problem to solve. But maybe like a good starting point is as you say, things like in the workplace, where if you put value on paternity leave as much as maternity leave, you're already setting the scene that you're adding equal value in the home, and that there's kind of an equal contribution that both fathers and mothers, or mothers and mothers and fathers and fathers can kind of bring to the workplace and to home. So I think that is a good point. I think maybe organizations can start thinking about, how do you create that parity? So then women can feel more comfortable having it all.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Singapore government's done a huge amount in terms of trying to create paternity and maternity or parental leave that's on parity with each other. So it's not about one person taking the lead, it's about both of them.
Yeah.
And you as the individuals can decide who takes the lead and who kind of takes the time off to look after the child, or whatever it might be. I think as well, as much as leaders possibly can, is to think about, how do you create an environment where women aren't forced to leave? How do you, a lot of big companies where they're creating childcare centres literally at the bottom.
Yeah,
I can't even remember who it was. I want to say it was maybe one of the big consultancies or law firms or something.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like a KPMG maybe?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Who have got childcare centres literally in the lobby.
Yeah.
How amazing is that? You can go lunchtime if you need to breastfeed. This is a win-win for both parties. And I can tell you, those women will be so loyal, because they'll be like, why would I leave? I've got it so good here.
Yeah.
And as a result, will give so much to that company, as they already do anyway.
I've always thought, why new office buildings don't factor that in.
That's so interesting.
They factor in breastfeeding rooms. Well, gosh, I hope they do. They factor in breastfeeding rooms. They factor in, all these kind of things, coffee shops and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, you put in a childcare centre.
That's so true.
I'm telling you, like, you've got a new stream of income because people will pay through the nose for it. You know your people are going to come to work and you know people are going to stay.
Gosh, this is such an excellent point you're making as to why women need to be part of processes and design. If you had working mothers either being consulted or part of a design process for a new building, for example, they would think of these things.
Yeah.
Or if you're a big corporation and you've got a working mum at the top who remembers what it was like to be going home and pumping or whatever it might be, she would think about putting a childcare centre at the bottom of the building.
Yeah.
Like, this is why you need to have diversity within the teams and the people who are designing systems for society. Because if you, and it's not just women, it's having people with disabilities because they will be thinking about things through their lens. It's about people, maybe lower income families, because, you know, like, it's so important to have this diversity of thought.
Yeah. Gosh, I reckon we could
go on
1,000
forever.
episodes on this. I know you have a narrative you want to change or you'd love to change. What one's that?
Yeah, I've got lots, but one of the big ones that's on my mind with a 3-year-old son, and obviously you've also got a 3.5-year-old son, is boys don't cry.
Yeah.
Fuck, I hate it.
No.
I really hate it.
I have this. We've talked about this before. I get a lot of like anxiety around how to raise him. Like, you know, to obviously to be a good human, which I would have no issue with, boy or girl, but just in a climate at the moment like it is, where it's like, you know, do no harm, like, you know, all of the things around be a good man, you know, treat women right, all those really, really important things that of course I've already considered, but I'm just like, how do you find the balance between, you know, being tough on them, but also letting them know that it doesn't need to be too tough, and it feels like just a minefield.
I totally agree. It's such a balancing act, because I will find myself, you know, I try not to say things like "don't cry, Roman." I don't think I've ever said "don't cry."
Oh no, I say it all the time. I
Do
say, because I think
but it
I say
depends
don't
on-
be a big boy, and I said you've got to be a big boy.
Okay.
But I think I'd say that if it was a girl.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll come back to you in 2 years.
Yeah.
I'll let you know if I said the same about
yeah.
Mia. But I do talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think it depends on the context in which you're saying it. Roman was having a tantrum last night. God, what was it? I think he wanted biscuits in his bed or something. Like, he wanted to eat them. And he's like laying on the floor crying. And it was completely like, he was just tired.
Irrational.
He was tired.
Yeah.
And I think I said something to him, isn't worth crying over. And I think, God, language is like everything for us in the household, like how we say things and phrase things. And because I'm so conscious of the impact it can have, and because they're like little parrots, they just repeat it back to you, and you know it's actually internalizing. So I try really hard not to say things like boys don't cry. But I guess the bigger, broader narrative that needs to change is this whole idea of men have to be masculine and the warriors and the providers, and they can't show emotion, and they can't be vulnerable, and they always have to be in control because that's what's expected of them. Also, maybe they don't think that women will find it, and maybe there are some women who don't find it attractive for men to not be that way. But I just think this is such a redundant narrative. And if we want our sons to raise up to be more empathetic and kind and generous and in touch with their emotions, and not have things like record high male suicide because they feel like they can't talk to anyone, we have to start changing these narratives now.
And I think a lot, you know, we've done unconscious bias training in both of our agencies, right? Like we've everywhere I've ever been, we've done that.
Yeah.
And it's the same application at home. I'm always really conscious of just not trying to behave a certain way because he's a boy.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do. I mean, by nature, he just seems to be more like a boy in that he like is obsessed with diggers and trucks and dinosaurs. And like the other day I was sitting in the kitchen and my daughter just gravitates to the books and just sits there quietly.
Yeah.
Like I was like, my son never did this.
Yeah.
So, you know, and so I'm always really conscious of whenever I say things, to your point, the language you use, the words you use, that unconscious bias training you do at work is very much applicable in the home.
Oh, totally.
And if you haven't done unconscious bias training, I strongly recommend it, because as much as you think maybe you don't do it, it's inherent in us. It's just built in our mechanics. And so what I love about that training is that it just makes you aware of it. And so then you kind of make more conscious choices.
Gosh, I wonder if there's unconscious bias training for parents. Surely there would be.
There would be. I'm sure it wouldn't be called that though. It'd just be like parenting a child, maybe. Like literally like just parent the child, not the gender.
But it's little things like Roman has got a little friend who's our next door neighbor, Mimi, who's just like hilarious and beautiful and so sassy. And Roman adores her. So she'll say like, Roman, we're going on an airplane now. Get your suitcase. This is like 3-year-olds. And he just follows everything she says. Like, and he'll just run after her. And I have to really like catch myself by saying things not saying things like, oh, Mimi's being bossy.
Yeah.
You know, like it's that whole thing and rethinking, you know, actually that's awesome. She's a sassy little 3-year-old who has an opinion. And like the other night, Andrew told Roman off, he was like, it's 7 p.m, you can't take your truck down the stairs. And Mimi just stood there and looked at him square in the eyes and goes, I said he could. Roman, you can take your truck down the stairs. And we like had to look away because we were laughing so much. But yeah, changing your language and your unconscious bias and this is how we change the narratives within society as well.
I think I've said this before around, I don't know if you remember, but when we did International Women's Day at BBDO, it was a long time ago, 8 years ago maybe. Do you remember I did that research into the language managers use when doing appraisals?
Yeah.
I really should find that again around how language is such an important part of when you are reviewing those that work for you.
For sure.
Because just exactly to your point, sassy is like probably a more
feminine word. True.
Bossy is more negative.
Yeah.
And so I remember this research being like the way we would talk about a male quality versus a female quality, they would, if you put it in the thesaurus, they'd mean the same thing, but the negative connotation for the female was so much more obvious.
Well, you would say like, wow, he's so assertive.
Yeah.
Wow, she's so bossy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one is positive, one and negative.
Or like one takes initiative, one's quite aggressive.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. Yeah, and I think these are all things that we can be conscious of. And I think we're already trained in the sense that we're working in advertising, so we're probably quite aware of how language can create cultural shifts. Yeah. But yeah, boys don't cry, and this idea that men
can't be soft,
and it starts from a young age is something that I think desperately needs to evolve. And I do think it is evolving. And I think, you know, there's the captain of the Fremantle Dockers AFL team back home. He's a very vocal advocate for mental health and he talks a lot about being softer and not having to be a man's man that like can't cry, can't have emotions.
Is that why sometimes why I love our industry? Because I think we have a role to play in helping to shape
definitely,
you know, that perception. And there's definitely been a move in the last, I'd say, decade towards having that kind of, you know, even in when you look at homemakers in ads now, it's not just a female, like there's a male there. Like I do think that's what sometimes makes me really proud to be in our industry because we can be the change agents for those conversations.
Totally, we can shape culture.
Yeah.
I mean, I laugh because I don't know if you had the Women's Weekly birthday cookbook.
Of course I did.
I think
have you got the new one?
It? Oh no, I don't.
Oh, my mum just gave me. They've released or re-released the original Women's Weekly cookbooks
with the original things.
Yeah, with the original pictures.
With literally the girls section and the boys section. The girls was like
princesses.
Was it Dolly Vartan cake?
I had you mean the doll in the
in the marshmallows, and then there was like a sewing machine, and boys was like crocodiles, trains, trucks, and stuff.
Yes, unfortunately they still do have that.
It's hilarious.
But I found that I appreciated that when I did my son's 3rd birthday cake. So I was like, cool, where's the boys section? Because he wants a digger.
Yeah, of course. What do you think is, we've got time for one more narrative, and I know you've got another one that you're quite passionate about.
So there's a very common theme around all of these narratives, and it's that we have this perception that men is the provider. And that's not a negative thing. I'm not saying they shouldn't be the provider. I think there's just been, between us, we've talked a lot about the role money plays in the relationships, the dynamics of the relationships. It's in, you know, I still laugh every time I think about this, but my husband, we both come from, I would say, quite traditionally rooted families. Like, you know, dad's the provider and mum stay at home. And, you know, as I said, absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we've kind of both come up with that perception. And Will's always had this belief, like very strong belief, that he must provide for his family.
Mm.
And I remember him once telling me that he could never propose unless he owned a piece of property.
Mm.
And I remember being like, that's such a weird thing to like have as like, I must tick that off my list and then I'll propose.
Yeah.
Needless to say, he bought that property. He bought it in April.
Yeah.
And I remember he bought it and I, in my mind, were like, oh, all right, well, proposal should come any day now then. Came a few months later. But it has always, and we've talked about this before because of obviously your situation with Andrew, that you have been the breadwinner for so long. This needs to be this kind of shift that doesn't just fall on the men. The pressure of providing doesn't just fall on men.
Yeah.
But it's a complicated, I think, narrative to get into.
Yeah, it is. I feel like you can't, if you prescribe to this thinking that men need to be the provider, then women can't have it all as well.
Mm.
Because like one needs to change for the other to succeed. Because if you feel like men are the only ones that can be the providers, that means they're the ones out working. Whereas actually sometimes women might be the provider and vice versa. I think in our situation, just, you know, I think I've talked about it in the past. Andrew is a serial entrepreneur and he's freaking amazing. He's the smartest person I know. He's had his own business for 5 years. He built some software. And as an entrepreneur's life is very up, down based on funding, sales, cash flow, everything else. So I've been the stable breadwinner in the sense that I'm the one that's got the kind of consistent salary coming in. Andrew provides still in so many other incredibly important ways. Like I am the most useless person in the kitchen.
Oh, this is true.
Like completely and utterly useless. He is amazing.
Incredible cook.
He's amazing at so many things. And, you know, the whole entrepreneurial side, it's not like he's not providing. It's not as consistent as what you might if you're in a kind of regular salary job working for the man. I think we have probably been a good example of changing this narrative and flipping it on its head that you can provide different things.
Yeah.
And at different life stages you provide different things, because there was a time when he was earning more than me. And then we made the conscious decision together to say, you know what, you're going to go out and do this, build this software by yourself, and I'm going to be the provider financially. And there will be times I'm sure in the future when that's going to flip again. And so it's like, what are you providing and at what points in your life, and how do those things change?
Yeah.
So I don't think
nice.
So
it's almost like changing the meaning of providing. So
totally.
Men can be a provider of many different things,
completely,
as opposed to it just being this financial contribution.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Like
I think we need to redefine the narrative around what does it mean to provide.
Yeah.
And stop looking at women providing the family side.
Yeah.
Obviously there's the biological thing that you're not quite going to change just yet. But yeah, just because you're the one that births a child doesn't mean that's the only thing you can ever provide, and vice versa. It doesn't mean that men have to be the financial provider. They might be the provider of emotional support, of family caretaking, whatever. Or you share those things.
I really like that. I think it also goes back to a previous episode where we talk about having great communication.
Yeah.
Because just to your point, that sense of what providing means has changed over time. And like, you know, we're exactly the same in that we've, you know, financially contributed more at one point but now Will takes Johnny, full stop. Like he is responsible for Johnny. I am responsible for Mia. Yeah. You know, and so it's really clear, and therefore we provide in those ways. Like I think that's exactly what it is. It's changing the notion of what providing means and what it means to you and at what point in your life.
Yep. And those things might change depending on the life stage that you're in.
Yeah.
And what you can contribute or can't contribute. Because, you know, there are days as well where, you know, often Andrew and I might just be waking up on the wrong side of the bed and be like, I just feel crap today in every way possible. You're going to have to be the provider today. Like you're going to have to take the lead.
Have you seen that woman? Oh, I really wish I could remember her name, who talks about the 100%.
Yes.
Like, do you remember? I think we've talked about this before. That? We should find it and we would definitely post this on our reels, on our Instagram reels, where she talks about you're never going to be 50-50.
Yep.
Ever.
Yep.
And that's not about man versus woman. That's just reality of life. You'll never have 50% of your capacity to do anything at one time. And so she says they have this rule in her household where they will agree on a number. So if that one comes home and is like, look, I'm 20%, like I'm not great. She will go, cool, I've got your 80.
Yeah.
Like I will take the load and that's fine.
Yeah.
And I think that she's like, that always changes. And I
really
think
cool.
what's really cool is sometimes he'll wake up and be like, no, I'm good. I've got 75. I was like, that's such a great way. And that goes back to something I talked to you about with Will and I, where we've decided this year to have like a year of yes, where if he needs something to fill his cup, if he needs to go to the gym or, you know, my trip to New York or our trip to Hong Kong, that we allow that space for each other, because if we say no, then that level of resentment comes in. And I think that's the same with the 50-50.
Yep.
Just knowing when you guys need a break or when we need to kind of lean into each other.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, those are three pretty big narratives to change. We're not going to change in one podcast. But this whole idea that women can have it all if the system is supporting them. Right now, it is not.
It is not.
But it's not impossible.
No.
And actually, I think one thing I would take away for me as like a leader, an agency leader, is I'm in the controlling seat to be able to create those things that will enable it. And I would say to anyone who is in that leadership position, think about how you can create an environment that cultivates or nurtures women, and also how are you bringing other people into your decision-making process to account for different viewpoints. Second one is that boys don't cry. Yeah. They can in fact cry. They can be soft and vulnerable, and that's not a bad thing. And men don't need to be the providers financially all the time. It can be a shared load, or they can provide other things, and women can be the provider financially. So many things that need to change.
Yeah. Would love anyone's opinion.
Totally.
Into how that might happen.
Yeah.
Obviously there's as we said, there's some big points there, but you know, we are here to discuss. We would love to be involved if there's something already happening to kind of change these narratives. So yeah, that's been our topic for today. Please do follow us on Instagram or LinkedIn. As we always say at the end of every episode, we'd love for you to reach out if you've got any feedback or any topics you want us to cover.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us. I am Ellie.
I'm Beck.
And this is the Full Timers Club. See you next time.